Cara, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so
I'm
excited.
excited.
Here.
Yeah, me too. We just had a bit of a conversation prior to recording, and I am really looking forward to this.
Yes, yes. I always think so fondly of you from seeing you do the songs at FTN. That's always my happy memory of you.
Well, it was a fun time, and yeah. But let's talk about you. Well, this first question is a bit about me as well, because as a guy coming from Canada in Edmonton, Alberta, the Edmonton Oilers are our hockey team. It is life here. I found out you played ice hockey growing up.
I did on an all boys team, no less.
That's what I read.
Yes, it
And
was.
I want to preface this to a point though. So I'm gonna link two parts of your history together here, and it's based upon a quote that I read based on your hockey base. How, if anything at all, did your days playing with all the boys allow you to, as you've said online, go punch for punch with the guys on Wall Street?
So I do think probably those years in the locker room probably prepared me for the trading floor, right? I mean, I think we're not thinking of trading floors today that are technology driven. Let's take ourselves back. You think of Eddie Murphy trading places, think of Wolf of Wall Street, Gordon Gekko, right? Like these are live open auction trading floors where the bigger you are was actually the better, right? Mathematical skills were great, but we also needed presence in the crowd. And here I am, all of 4'10", and at that point in my life, maybe 110 pounds, right? Like that's not an easy task to stand your ground and create your dominance in that crowd. Fortunately, and I always say, it's been said in many books, there's so much you can learn in life. There's also just being lucky and being in the right place at the right time. I just happened to wind up on Wall Street, and it was absolutely the right environment for me. Like, it just worked. They probably didn't know what ADHD was back then. Nobody was putting that out there. I got to Wall Street and I was like, I'm going to do well here because I've got the personality, I've got the energy, and I have no idea that I'm 4'10". I think I'm a 6'5" linebacker, right? Like in my head, that's how I identify. So it was not hard for me to go head for head with guys. And I was good at my job, and that's not to sound cocky. There was a lot of it was Wall Street, right? So there was a lot of who you know and this and that. And I realized I didn't know the right people. I don't come from that background. My dad wasn't on Wall Street. So I didn't have this whole shoe-in. So I just had to be good, right? So it just forced me to be that much better. Always a sidebar, funny note, both playing hockey and the trading floor. I've never had a drink in my life. And most people think that's so odd, right? I don't have an alcoholic father that beat me. I don't have some story. For me, it became very quickly about I couldn't have anything that was going to lower my senses and my ability to be, at my best all the time. I just couldn't afford to. Being an only girl in all those situations, they're waiting for you to make a mistake.
When you say, you said twice there, and thank you for sharing that. But on that trading floor, you just had to be good. I had to be the best at I had to be the best at all the time. In this largely, I would say, extremely largely male-dominated role, especially at that point in time, how did you actually land yourself there?
So I had a friend of a family member who worked on the trading floor, and my parents, I really wanted to be an actress. I thought I'd be great at that. And my parents were like, that's not a paying job. So you have to be an accountant, a stockbroker, or an actuary. And those were legit the choices. There was no other option. And so I was I looked at what being an actuary meant, and I was I can't sit still. I don't think I'm going to do well. As I was good with numbers, and I think that's where my parents got that from. And I could be an accountant, I guess, but again, I don't like to sit still. And so I was well, I've seen, Gordon Gekko and Wall Street. I was I could be Gordon. I could totally do that job. Again, not really knowing all that went into it. It just looked like chaos and fun. And I was I like chaos and I like fun. So, and I'm good with numbers. Great. Sign me up. And so somebody was like, oh, we can get you a summer job as a coffee runner. And so I went down back in the 90s. There were still runners on the trading floor because the people that were in the trading pits couldn't leave the pit to get lunch, to get coffee, to get a message from the upstairs offices. So there were physical people that ran those messages back and forth. And so I became a coffee runner. And then obviously just moved up and never left. I never left the trading floor. I did finish NYU in 4 years, but I wound up sophomore year forward. I did it at night. I mean, I wasn't a great student. I couldn't sit still, right? I got through it, but I didn't enjoy it. I really enjoyed the chaos of the floor.
It really sounds like you enjoyed that chaos.
Loved it. I go to bed every night wishing that we could go back to 1997.
Oh, wow. In that chaos, especially now as you've done more and more learning around the behaviors and emotions around money, reflecting back, what did you learn about the raw human emotions when it comes to money?
Right. Well, so that's right. So I didn't know then that I was getting an entire education in behavioral finance that was so far out of a textbook that nobody, right? It's lived experience, right? And so I always say to people, nobody, unless you've worked on a trading floor, I don't know that you can conceptualize, because I don't know of another job, really, even if you go to drug dealing. I don't know of any other job where the direct correlation between the person and the money is so connected. With every other job, there's a piece between the person and the money, right? Mm-hmm. So you have a person and they're selling bottles of water. They got to sell the water to turn it into money. If you're making cars, the person you make the cars, you turn it into money. In trading, there's you make a trade, there's the money. There's no product. There's nothing else but you. So the ego is so directly connected. I mean, we have a saying on Wall Street, you're only as good as your last trade. So it doesn't matter what you did yesterday. It doesn't matter what you're going to do this afternoon. The last thing you did is exactly what you get to behave on. And so I always joke, and I'll apologize forward for all the boys that I've been not nice to in my life. But I used to remember, I was tiny and I went to the trading floor. There wasn't many girls, and so there'd always be the guy that would hit on me, and I would decline nicely. And I have a certain type that I like. I don't have a problem saying that. And he would clearly not be my type. And as he would move up the ranks at work, he would continue to pursue me. And I would ask flat out, well, what changed that you think from 3 months ago to this month? And he'd be like, you didn't say I got a promotion? And I'm like, I got a promotion too. I couldn't, and I realized how quickly money made, for lack of a better word, the peacock feathers shoot open. And I saw people that came to work, the first year with me, shoulders down, head kind of hunched over. All of a sudden, as they creeped into 6 figures, multiple 6 figures, 7 figures, whoa, those shoulders come up, those eyebrows go up. I mean, I always love the image they do of Jeff Bezos, where it was basic Amazon or Amazon Prime, right? There's something that money does do to people that gives them that, whether it's the amount of risk they can take or the amount of chances they have in their back pocket, that gives them more confidence because they don't have to be exactly right all the time, right? There's multiple things that happen, but that initial ego, when you think your self-worth and your net worth get to this level, your whole demeanor changes. And for me, my demeanor actually didn't change. I was always a little crass. I was always a little, tacky. It was funny. The joke used to be and I'm not even from Staten Island. I'm from Brooklyn. But the joke in the trading floor would be, doesn't matter how much we pay her, we can't get her out of Staten Island. And that was because I was just a little bit me. And I was just always me. And so as I would do better at work, and I'm specifically talking financially, people would say to me, don't you think you should dress nicer? Or don't you think you should drive a nicer car? Or don't you think? And I was like, no, I like myself. I'm still hanging out with the guys in a schoolyard in Brooklyn. Those are my boys. So it was interesting to me that everyone else join the country club, drink the fancy wine. Like all of a sudden, the creep lifestyle. Sean, the truth is, I know the terms now because I've done the work and I went to graduate school and learned everything.
Mhm.
But then I just could see these patterns of things that were happening, very confused, right? Like I was like, wait, why is this like this? Why does this exist like this?
It's really, really fascinating. I guess I'm thinking about I listened to you talk with Ed Combs on his podcast,
Yeah.
and you talked about how your father played rough with you, but you always knew he was there to care for you.
Yep.
And it's just making me think about how often, in hindsight now, we can think that we use money to seek this validation that perhaps filling this void that we didn't have before. Do you feel like your father's affection to you, that undeniable love, perhaps was one, because we don't know the exact answer, one of the reasons why you didn't have to seek those exterior rewards with the nicer car, the better suits, etc.?
I would say 1,000%. So much so that my father has actually shunned me and guilted me when I did indulge things. My dad is extremely, like, he is the definition of a tightwad. It doesn't matter if you can afford something or buy something. He's making you feel guilty that you want something better than, like, a pre-used cup that we just drank out of. Like, he is that. He's super frugal. Again, he was raised by a depression parent. Knowing what I know now, right? Like he lost his dad when he was a kid, right? So single mom, 3 boys, depression era, right? Like, so I can tell you why it is now. As a kid, I didn't know these things, but I did know certain things about him. My dad's kind of a jerk, but like in the nicest way. People get offended when I say that, but thank God he was. Because if he wasn't, I could never have went and did the things that I did, right? Like him being who he is absolutely gave me the confidence of being able to be like, you can forever be really like well supported by someone, but they can still expect you to hold yourself accountable or raise the bar or not rest on your laurels. And funny, I always tell the story of my dad who he's a taxi cab driver turned school bus driver. And, my dad is that story. And again, I didn't learn this till later in life. You know, the story where the man goes on vacation and he goes on a boat with a guy and he says, I could buy you 10 boats and we could run a big business. And the guy's like, what would I do all that for? And the guy's like, so then you'll own this big business and then you could sell whenever you want. And he's like, I do that already. So my dad's friend is the one that actually got me down on Wall Street. But my dad's priority was time. My dad loves to play tennis. And so my dad was specifically a school bus driver because he would drive kids in the morning and then he would drive kids in the afternoon and he'd play tennis 280 days a year. But he's extremely well versed in investments. I mean, I get a call from my dad every morning. The price of oil, the price of gas, the price of gold. What are we thinking about the yields? How are the interest rates going? Like that's my dad and I's. Every morning we get like a check-in. It's so interesting because knowing he knows all of this stuff, he would have absolutely been able to go to Wall Street. And when his friends wanted him to go, he was like, no, thank you. So I did work 50 weeks out of the year and try to go on vacation 2 weeks to go play tennis. And what if the weather turns over? He's like, I never worry about that. I play tennis 280 days a year. He's 78 years old. He still plays 4 to 5 days a week. Right? So he really, without probably really understanding it through my life, he was such a huge influence. And so was my mom has a completely different money narrative, but she had her own very money-centric ways. And they were both very vocal about them. Like money was always talked about in our house.
Was it Bank Tuesdays I read?
Bank Tuesdays. And the whole family banked. I don't know anybody else who had 3 generations at the bank on Tuesdays. Like, nobody's done that. Right? Like, and to think about what that does for a person, you're accountable to people. You have to talk about how you acquired the money, what you're going to do with it. Like, just that planning that goes into that excitement that somebody's going to be proud of you. Like, I don't know if my family could really understand how successfully they set me up for that. And we didn't have a lot of money, but I don't want to construe this with, my grandmother was a lunch lady. My mom worked part-time and my dad was a school bus driver. We weren't poor, but we didn't have money, like extra.
We often, like, I'm a parent of 2 young kids, and you struggle with this, like holding expectations, to what you're saying, and discipline, but also you want to be there for them. You don't want to have, children who get everything because you weren't ever had discipline with them. Your father and your mother's story really, I think, highlight this idea of like life can be difficult. We can hold people accountable, but that undeniable, if I come to mom and dad, they're going to give me a hug. The power of that. I
Right.
can
They
still
weren't
be.
giving me money, right? They were like, not that they wouldn't really, but money was not, they were going to give me like knowledge. They were going to give me resources. They were going to give me ideas. They were going to give me a way to get out of jail. If I, you know what I mean? Like if I did a plan, that stuff was readily available.
So
But
going on
no,
to stories, they're teaching you to fish instead of giving you the
exactly.
fish.
100%. And it's funny, I have 5 kids, and I've really took very, very, very like to heart that I had to do for my kids what, my family did for me. And so this has a lot of legs to the story, but to keep it then our podcast time. When I first started having children, one, let's be honest, Wall Street wasn't going to be kind to any mom. But two, I genuinely loved my job. I also made a ton of money, right? Like this was where I wanted to be. So I initially bought babysitters to help with kids. And I quickly realized there's not enough money in the world that I can pay someone to be a jerk to my kids. And I know I keep using this word jerk, and people are probably going to read me for this, but like honestly, if it's your job, how difficult are you gonna like drive my kid to do something? Because you're directly correlated to doing a good job, you get your paycheck. So if I need you to be a little rougher with my kid or a little bit more stern, and now my kid's gonna complain to me that the babysitter's, too rigid, you fear your job. So the only person that could do that was me. And so really reaching those crossroads of like, oh my God, I'm going to leave my job to be like a stay-at-home mom. Like, and I'm not saying that like, I'm not like, but for me, that was really like, oh, holy Jesus. I was like, what does this job pay? And like, what kind of jerks do I got to deal with in this role? Like, I don't know. Like, it was just so not what I had ever envisioned in my life. Like, I really believed, as I had seen other women do, I was going to stay at work and I was going to hire a nanny and I was going to have kids and I was going to have this, what people love to call work-life balance. And I was like, that's actually not going to work. It's a work-life battle. And I've got to win so many battles so I can win the war, right? Like, that's what we're doing here. So when I opted to stay home, and I can't tell you that went off without any major hitches. There were major, major hitches. But I knew in my heart of hearts that's what had to happen. And I like till this day, like like I see my husband's career. There are moments I want to throw myself on the floor and be like, that should have been my career. Like, I get frustrated. I'm not human. But I now have big kids. They're 13 through 18. So they're not big, but they're bigger. And I see who they are as people. I mean, I have a son who's like a monarch ninja. Nobody's got a more beautiful budget than this kid who like is maxed out his IRA and like figured out how to like work this thing and that thing and is invested over here and, bought his own whole life policy. Like, and people will be like, Carrie's 17. Like, that's ridiculous. But I'm so proud that they've my husband and I have a lot more resources than my family had. So my kids, I'm very aware that they could be very different people. They all go to, other than the little one who can't work yet, all of them have jobs. All of them do their own investing. All of them ask their questions. Other than like major things, they know all the extras they have to pay for. And I appreciate that, right? Like I appreciate that they feel the correlation between the input and the output, because I think that's where we hinder people. When the hunter-gatherer in our brain stops working, when I see this with a lot of families of wealth, where your spending or what I would call your daily run rate, like what it costs to run your life, doesn't correlate to the output you're putting out into the world, there's a disconnect. Even if you think you're doing, like, your brain does not compute that. Your scales are off, right? So it can feel not good when you don't feel like you're making an impact in your own financial well-being. That's my experience. Again, I only have 5 kids. Maybe there's people out there with more who have a different experience. This has been my experience, right?
Yeah.
Situation.
As you share that story, I just think about your father's lesson and mother's about teaching how to fish. Despite you might have a whole bunch of fish in your backyard or wherever your fridge, it still seems like you're giving that lessons on how to fish with your own children.
Yeah.
And I like this idea of like the correlation between input and output. We mentioned your mother. It reminded me of something that I read preparing for today, that the Sunshine Sales Club magazine. And the reason what's making me think about that is I believe you wanted something in the magazine and you had to go work for it. And boy, it sounded like you did work for it.
I did, and that my mother always loves that story because she's like, that's how we knew we weren't gonna have to worry. So it was this little sales magazine, and they had all these toys. And of course, as a 6-7-year-old kid, that's what I was driven to. I was like, what do I got to do to get this toy? She was like, well, you sell this stuff, and based on how many products you sell, you get points, and then you can do it. Well, in the end, as I was sold all the products, I was allowed to go like a couple of houses to the left and the right. Then I was begging her to like take me around the block. I was good at sales, which who knew? But I'm personable, right? So knocking on the door, like people were just excited. I was reliable, right? So like think about job skills. So like let's roll back for 1 second. These are things that I think we're missing in today's big society about teaching kids just basic things. How to talk to someone and make those basic job skills that don't need big like coding skills, just the basic skills. Anyway, so as I was doing this, as I got enough points, my mom said to me, there's an option here where instead of getting points, you can get X percentage of what you sold. She's like, and here's the Toys R Us magazine. Look how much the price of the pogo ball is. Now, I was 7. I probably could do basic math, but I don't think I was a mathematician yet. But when she explained that what I would get was, let's say, $52, and the pogo ball that I really wanted was $29.99, that I would have this much money left over, but if I did it with points, I would only get the pogo ball. So I was like, okay, can you take me? So I had this whole plan. Well, so we get to the store, and I got this $52, like in singles, no less. And I'm like, I find the pogo ball, it's purple and black, and this is the one I wanted. The 3 kids down the block had it. And I said, okay, if I buy this, how much do I have left? She does the math, and she's like, you'll have $20 left, or 19, whatever. And I'm like, what is that going to feel like? So this is back to the other story. So I take the money away for the pogo ball. Now I'm holding what I'm going to have left. And I don't like the way it feels. I don't like that I have less, that it doesn't feel as much opportunity. And so then I said, well, what if I buy the green one? And she's like, Cara, they're the same price. Like, I was trying 12 different things. She said, I walked around the store. I couldn't make a decision. Now, I'm a trader, so I make decisions like rapidly, right? I had 5 kids in 5 years. I am not hard on making decisions, right? I could not buy this thing. I left the store with a bubble. I don't know if you remember, you're probably not as old as me, but this thing, you blew bubbles. It was like a plasticky, like gummy thing. Yeah, and they were like 99 cents. They came in like a toothpaste tube.
Yeah. No, I exactly know.
That's what I left the store with.
Wow.
And she said at that point, she knew I was experiencing pain, and it didn't matter what I could ever afford. I was not going to be able to spend money for I just don't have it in me to just spend frivolously. And honestly, I probably realized at that point my love of derivatives trading, because I realized with the Sunshine Sales Club, X amount of points to get the thing. But if I did it in cash, I could buy it cheaper and, I could do the arbitrage. So I do think in that story alone, There's probably, and what does the American Psychological Association say? By the age of 7, we have an understanding. So, like, for me, so much of this work is what I lived. It was my lived experience. And look, I didn't know all of this until Dr. McCoy sat me down and I did my big person of the financial therapist paper and wrote it all out to see it on paper. But having all of these experiences, you're like, whoa, right? Like, how cool, how lucky was I that I got to get all of these experiences so I could help other people get to where they need to get to be financially healthy.
Yeah, what a great story. And, as a parent myself, I'm thinking about your mother and how our little decisions make a big impact. She could have said, like, maybe I'm tired. I don't want to go around the neighborhood. No, let's not do that. But for her to, like, let your wings fly, I think that's important as parents.
Well, I don't know that you watched the wedding show, but if you ever get a chance, there's a line in the show where my dad says, "Well, we really didn't raise Cara. We kind of just held on. Well, she blew through everything." So apparently, Sean, you see the big picture of what
Yeah. Well, I didn't watch it, but I came across an article that was associated. I was a little confused why I was talking about that, but now it's making sense. And holding on, you're saying holding on. One piece of that article I remember, it sounds like maybe not at the time, but your current husband had to hold on to you when there was a quote that said she would come into the trading room with a Ziploc of, I think it was Starbucks, smelling like cigarettes and talking about her bets from the night before.
Yeah, so again, remember I grew up in Brooklyn. So
Yeah.
like the crew that I hung out with were your quintessential Brooklyn boys who were playing cards in Atlantic City poker rooms. Like that's where it came from, right? We played CeeLo in back alleys. Like again, that was the environment I lived in, right? And so I went to Wall Street, but I still had a relationship and my community, right, were these guys. And so after work, I would meet up with them, and whether we wound up in Atlantic City or some other poker room or, some gambling hall somewhere, I would stay and hang out with them. And, fortunately for me, because I didn't party and drink, I could, and I have a ridiculous amount of energy. I'm well aware of that. So, like, I could stay at that level and be awake and party and hang out, whereas other people eventually crash if they're coming off of whatever they're on. But I would just stay out and hang out and party with them all night and then go back to work the next day. And I mean, nobody was bothering you on the trading floor. It didn't, you wore a trading jacket. Nobody cared really what you wore unless clients were coming. So sometimes I'd walk back onto the trading floor and they'd be like, "Karen, it's just you can go home." And I was like, no.
It sounds like it was a very rich life. And I don't mean the dollars and cents in that statement.
Yeah, it was. It was totally, not only was it a rich life, but like, it was a life well lived. Right? Like, it was. Yeah. Like, I do think at the moment, there was a moment, there's a very clear story of like where the crossover, where it stopped being fun. Full story, and I'm an open book. I had an ectopic pregnancy and I wound up in the emergency room to get, cleaned up. Mm-hmm. And the Fed meeting was the next day. And one of my bosses said to me, you better be at your post. Mm-hmm. And I was like, right. So like they're gonna cut me open and like maybe take a tube out. I mean, I don't know, and I'm not trying to make light of it, but like this was my first pregnancy. I had no idea. I was newly married. Like I had no idea what was to come. And let's be honest, living in an all boys world, I kind of stopped being that kind of feminine. Like I had really succumbed to like one of the guys, right? Like so I think I even messed with myself a bit. And I got out of that emergency room. There's laparoscopic surgery, so it's not an overnight stay. They let me out at the end of the day, and I did show up at work the next day, like oozing and in pain. And I mean, there's a hilarious story that goes with it. Again, I'm not a drug user, but they gave me some Percocet. The doctor was like, just if you don't take them, but you might need them, and the kid on the trading floor stole my Percocet. And like, I was like, really, like, I'm here, I'm bleeding, I'm in pain. Like, you can't
Yeah,
make this stuff up, right? Like, that should be a scene in a movie where you're
that
like,
that should be.
really? Are you kidding me? So I think for me, that was like the crossing moment. September 11th had happened 2 years prior to that. That was one of those shake my core moments, right? When I think of like, I know we talk about financial trauma a lot in the work that you and I do, but I also talk about financial inflection points, which I think of them like divots on the street where like rain collects, you know? And so I think about inflection points in my life. September 11th was definitely one of those inflection points where I started to question what it was that I was really after. Right? I saw a lot of my friends not make it through. I ran over the Brooklyn Bridge. I was in the trading floor at the time. Right? So I had lived through the whole scenario. 2 years then later, I have this next episode with the ectopic pregnancy. And I think at that point, I really started to realize, is it all about the money? Like, is there another way? Is there another path? But Sean, remember, for me, I really did love the job.
No.
So unlike some people who may have hated the job but loved the money, I genuinely loved the job. Not that I don't love the money, but I wasn't utilizing the money the way others were. I didn't have a Coke problem. I didn't have a Ferrari. In the end, I had a few big ticket items, but initially, I was just me.
Mhm.
Because I didn't, to be honest with you, I didn't know what to do with the money. Right? Like I wasn't, again, I don't come from that. So I didn't know, I mean, I knew how to invest. I knew how to like 401k. I knew how to buy some stock, but like I didn't know big picture, like how to prepare for wealth. And remember, I was young,
Mhm.
22, 23. I mean, to have that kind of sizable money at that age and not have a guidance around it. And financial advisors were talking to they weren't coming after kids.
Yeah, so much there. And so I like how you said it wasn't about the money, hun, and how you love that job.
I mean, the money was huge, but,
Yeah,
but but I really did love the job.
right. And what I'm curious then is you mentioned about this crossover and perhaps the ability to, in a way, break the money in the job. Perhaps that maybe paved the way for you to start transitioning away. So maybe can you speak about that transition? You talk about these inflection points. I would assume that's
Yeah.
perhaps is one when you decided to exit that world. What was that
Well,
like?
so right, I'm having these moments where I'm questioning it. Now I
Mhm.
have the topic pregnancy I mentioned before. I went on to have 5 kids shortly thereafter. I initially thought I'd get the babysitter. Remember, we talked about that a little
Mhm.
while ago. And then I opted that I needed to stay home. For those first couple of years that I was going to stay home, I wish you could interview people in my family. It was like an utter nightmare. Like, I would call my husband at work and be like, I just changed 9 diapers, and that should be worth $6,300. And he's like, you're out of your mind. But again, when you're a trader and you live and die by your P&L, and now it's 1:30 on a Wednesday, and I have no idea if I'm doing good or bad. Remember, raising kids, there's no P&L at the end of the day. You
No.
don't know if you've done good or bad. Right? So for
Yeah.
me, that was so frustrating. Like, how do I know if I'm doing a good job? And then I chose to parent differently than like, and I'm going to open down this barrel, but I definitely was not a conventional parent. And I got a lot of heat. People poked holes. People told me I wasn't doing it right. People told me, right? Moms love to tell other moms, like, all the things
Mhm.
they're doing wrong. And I was like, okay, well, you do you, I'll do me. Like, I don't know what to say. Like, I gotta do what I can do and what I can manage, right? It was, so here I am, no P&L. I'm like trading blind, literally. It's like flying IFR, right? Like, I was totally blind. And I'm like, I have no idea if I'm doing a good job. And I don't see a paycheck with my name on it at the end of the week. Like, it was so psychologically destroying, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Right. And so, fine, I like mustered through. I wound up, by the time my little one went to preschool, I got like a part time job. And I went back to Wall Street. Well, there's a stopover. I moved the kids to a foreign country and made them go live with nothing because I was really adamant about them needing to understand what the value of a dollar was. But we don't have time for that. So then I come back and I went back to Wall Street. And I realized there were things that I actually missed about being a mom. Like I missed having flexibility to be able to own my time. And Wall Street wasn't going to give me that. That's why I moved into nonprofit work. So at that point, I go to work for a nonprofit and I get tasked with giving financial education to unbanked kids. Now, think about the stories we've just been telling. I come from a pro-bank family. I go to Wall Street, which is like bank on steroids. And now I'm working with kids who don't trust the banking system, live in places what we call banking deserts, and they absolutely don't think the bank is for them. And I was tasked with building a financial education program for them. And so that really proved to be a whole eye-opening experience. But funny enough, now I'm on the same block of where the New York Stock Exchange is, just literally on the other side of Broadway, running this program. And funny enough, what I learned was humans all want exactly the same thing. They want those peacock feathers. They want others to notice them. They want to be heard. They want to be seen. And so I thought, how fascinating these kids. So it was this workforce development program. These kids, and when I talk to them about what they're after the same things the other guys were after, except the zeros are just so different. And I'll go one further to say, I was so impressed with some of the kids I met in those programs because I thought, wow, if they get it right with 2 arrows in their pocket, right? That means if they've got a 50% chance of getting it right. So I've got 100 arrows in my pocket and I still only need to get 1 shot. You can really suck. Do you know what I mean? Like I thought, like this is so, we don't celebrate that enough, right? We just look at people's zeros and we just judge them on that. So that became really, for me, the basis of like, well, there's more here. And then it wasn't until COVID that we moved from New York to Florida. I thought, I'd left the nonprofit at that point and moved into, I went back to K-State, got the degree in financial psychology therapy, and then moved into this work. But that's the whole kit and caboodle. But I do feel like I was preparing for this place through all of those jobs.
Yeah. As I'm listening to your story, it makes me think of this idea of like, having this desire to detach from desired outcomes. Meaning like, also I'm thinking about it. I read that you, at like 24, you said in that article, you're going to retire by 30.
Yep.
You're not 30, you're over 30, you're not retired, whether choice or not. But also you had this vision of it being in on Wall Street forever, but then you move on to having kids. Then you move to a foreign country, which is even more change. And it just seems like you're iterating or changing despite your 24-year-old self was like, no, I'm retiring at 30 on Wall Street. Life will be fine. So you go in the nonprofit world.
Yeah. So a couple of things here. One is my favorite saying, and I should tattoo it across my chest, is fantasy is always better than reality. No matter what, the fantasy is always. So we throw those pillars out there because they allow us, a North Star direction.
Yeah.
So that's how hard it. For me, retiring at 30 wasn't so much retire Jimmy Buffett sitting under a palm tree, although I would have liked that. It was more about, exactly. It was more about, if I don't like the way I'm being treated or I don't like what I'm doing, I am not financially hooked that I have to stay doing it. Mm-hmm. That's what I meant by the age of 30, I wanted to have total autonomy to how I wanted to spend my days. And so I like to actually go to work. If you talk to any of my kids, they'll say, Mommy was chasing Jimmy Buffett. That's why we moved to Florida. And Mommy stinks and Jimmy Buffett passed and Mommy went back to work. Like,
wait, do you like Jimmy Buffett?
God, I love Jimmy Buffett. I love Jimmy Buffett.
All my life lessons were taught from my dad through Jimmy Buffett songs.
Of course. Pirate looks at 40.
Yes,
You can learn everything you need. Don Henley teaches you about, life. Glenn Fry teaches you about love, and Jimmy Buffett teaches you about how it all comes together.
We did a memorial for him in my parents' front yard when he passed.
My gosh, well, I literally threw myself on the floor and took A1A to Key West and just cried my eyes out. We're doing a memorial here in Florida in September for him. But But legit, like I did move, and I moved. New Yorkers go to the East Coast of Florida. That's traditionally. I moved to the West Coast, like where Buffett Margaritaville was, specifically because I mean I live in a retirement community. You know? My husband and I did both. I mean, in theory, I can't call it retirement because everybody was like, "You're 45 years old, you're not retired." But for us, like we figured out we didn't need to go to a 9 to 5 anymore, and so we did move here. Now, I will tell you, work ethic is work ethic. Like I work probably 18-hour. I sent somebody an email this morning at 3:30 this morning. Like I work ridiculous hours. It's just I can't live well enough alone, right? And so money is not the driver so much anymore. I mean, of course, money never hurts, but the drive to want to like build things and do things and like this is going to sound silly, but like I love to just make a mess of things and then put it all back together. There's something so satisfying about chaos and then it's organized.
Yeah.
Right? So that's probably why I was so attracted to the trading floor though. Right? Every day you walked in and it was a zoo. And then when the bell rings at 4 o'clock, like it just calmed down.
And it seems with the nonprofit, then the unbanked demographic you're working from is like their internal lived experiences. I would assume a bit or not a bit, like chaos, and you coming in there and putting it back together.
And not shunning them, right? Like for me, the big thing I learned with those kids. So, right, they were using check cashing places to cash the checks that we were giving them through the workforce development program. You know, what I was basically told from the city of New York, who was running this program, was we've got to get these kids financially educated so they don't lose this money to these third party cash places. And they're like, they don't know anything about finance. And I was like, well, I don't know if I believe you. So I went in to talk to these kids, and instead of going with this formal education of like, we're going to learn A, B, C, D, I said to them, how do you get things done? And they said, like what? And I'm like, you want to buy a soda, you want to buy a pair of jeans, you want to buy Nikes, Air Force Ones. How do you get that done? And so they started telling me stories. Some I won't repeat because they definitely were not up and up. But some stories, like one story that came out was a kid who told me his brother's friend worked at the local bodega. He went to the bodega every morning before they opened because the brother's friend would give him 2 cases of water. And then he would take those cases down by like Riverside Drive, which is like the FDR Drive in New York City. So it's right outside Harlem. And he would sell the waters as people were sitting in traffic. And then at the end of the night, he would go pay the kid back so the register would check out. So I'm like, you're using leverage, you're using trust, you're using credit, and you're making a spread. Sounds to me like you're sophisticated. Like you're not just financially educated, you're really financially educated, right? Because don't tell me these kids are uneducated. They're educated, they're just going outside the system. So I think the reason why I had such a success with that group was because I didn't tell them this is the way they had to do it. I said to them, well, how are you doing it? And these are these other options that can be offered to you that will fit into your life and may help you in some of the things you're already doing. And so that I became a very trusted source to those kids because I wasn't there like, this is the way you, like that's, no, we're not doing that. These kids knew what they were doing. They were surviving. I give them credit for, I mean, we don't celebrate that enough. Somebody that figures out a way to get something done is so much better off than someone who sits around and they're like, do it for me.
I love your stories, and I'm just thinking about how you were talking about your father earlier about the story about I believe it was an American went down to Mexico to see the fishermen, etc. And it sounds like you're now embodying that with these children, not being that guy being like, hey, you got to buy all these boats to go make this big factory to sell fish. Instead, you're kind of, you are seeing them for them and not doing for them, but helping build capacity with them. And it seems like you're continuing on those lessons your father taught you.
I'm trying because I think for me, they were great lessons, right? They really worked out well for me. I always say I almost sometimes feel like I really got to like arbitrage a lot of my life. Like I've gotten to put inputs in and get huge outputs out of things. And I don't mean dollars and cents always. I just mean I've been able to maximize some of my experiences because I knew when I was going into them that, as I said before, it's not work-life balance, it's work-life battles. So I believe that if I looked at the battle and I knew this is the one I've got to win, or this is the one that's going to leave that inflection point, and you don't always know, but I do think you get smarter with age, right? Like I was, I was much more aware of when I needed to really hit it home.
That last part you say, I get smarter with age. So we've talked a lot of different experiences. You really seem to, I say surrender in the sense of surrender to the situation ahead of you and not fight it with resistance. As we age, as we evolve, our money stories and relationships with money do as well. What pieces of wisdom or insight could you share as you reflect back on your changing relationship with money?
So I don't know if you've ever used the Money Habitudes assessment tool, but the only way I know how to describe myself is I'm a 9 in planning, which is like the tippy top. Not realize at some point I would spend so much time exhausted about what if, that I would miss the moment. So as I aged, I learned, and again, very mathematical, that I was going to get a formula of either how many plans I was allowed to give myself, and then I just had to relinquish control. Also, I really became very, very aware, which I always knew, but I became better at it, really understanding what I call the downside risk, which is I play a lot of poker. And so as long as you still have chips at the table, you're still in the game. Once the chips are all gone, if there's no buy-in, you're out. And so for me, I became very aware as I got older to assess situations and be able to say, what puts me out of this game? And anything better than that, I might as well give myself some room to ebb and flow through it or enjoy it. Or, right, like if it is something that could take me out, then I need to be a little bit more aware or a little bit more, concrete in the way it has to get done. But if it can't take me out of the game, then I might as well see how the round ends up. Right? Like, you know what I mean? Like I think what that's given me is a level of not fun on life, but it's given a level of excitement that I don't see many bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. I see people in all financial spectrums. Because of my Wall Street life, I probably have more people that have more means than most in their social circle. I don't see a lot of bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, but I don't see a lot of zest. I see a lot of stuff. I see a lot of management of those things. I see a lot of like being seen or who, right? What does Morgan Housel talk about in the book? When you pull up in a fancy car, nobody really looks at you. They think about what themselves would look at in the car, right? Like, that's the kind of stuff I see a lot of. And I don't know if anybody notices me or not. Like I don't know. I'm like, I'm actually having a great time. Don't notice me because
It's making me think of this. I had a conversation with James Victoria. He's an artist, and we had it on the podcast, and he talks about how like inside of us, there's this like creative child that's just ready to jump out. Yet the I forget, like the conditioning of the social narrative that we have. And I think especially around success, pulling up in that car, money, it seems to snuff out that creative child. As I talk to you, I feel like you just let this creative child.
Remember, you touched on it before, right? You read the thing where I said by 30, I want to be retired. So maybe, when you really put that in perspective, so for me, it was I needed security before anything, right? When I walked down the aisle, my husband, the joke always was, I wasn't like to have it to hold till this day forward. I was like, I need my mortgage paid on time. I like the air conditioning set at 71. Like, these are the things I need, and those are the things you got to sign up for, right? Like, I'm not afraid to work, but I also don't want to be with somebody who's not afraid to work. I can guarantee you I'm not going to look right? Like,
Cara, speaking of working and weddings, is it true that you changed some vows for richer and rich I'm willing to work?
Yes, we did. It is for richer and richer, and through health and due sickness, we do long-term healthcare policies for that. I mean, people were giggling, right? But I was honest, and
Yeah.
I was exactly who I am. And listen, why do couples get divorced? Because they don't have these conversations. And I was like, I really would prefer not to be divorced. The odds are stacked against me. So let me at least put everything out I can, so I know when it, God forbid, it's over, I put my best foot forward, right? And so again, but back to the 30 years old, I think that's what I was saying in that sentence, that I
Mm-hmm.
want to be able to unleash who I want to be, my most
Mm-hmm.
authentic self, right? Because when you're in a job that you have to care about the paycheck, care about the boss, care about, right, like how you're playing nice with office politics, you often have to tamper down who you really are. I'm a little abrasive, as we've mentioned. I'm a little tacky, like I fly out the handle at times, right? And so that couldn't always be if I'm somebody's like subservient, like if I'm the junior or I'm not in charge, or right. So I needed to get financially established enough that if I acted up at work or I did something that wasn't copacetic and they let me go, there was enough money to pay the bill. Does that make sense? So I
Yeah.
think, for lack of a better, like I don't think I had a better word than retirement, but I don't
Mm-hmm.
think it wasn't the true sense of like 65, I'm getting my RMD, I'm going to Margaritaville retirement. I think it was much more of a mindset of like, you don't like me, no problem. Like
Mm-hmm.
I've got enough in my pocket that I could still find something else to do.
Yeah, no, that I mean it seems like you're seeking that independence and that security and not have to rely on in that time Wall Street so that you can let your wings fly like your parents had did. Um I, I see the time here. I want to respect your time. I feel like I could talk to you all day. Uh eh, we talked about many transitions. And then there's another transition when you go to money habitudes. Let's talk about money habitudes where you are now, the CEO. What was it about money habitudes? I can imagine there was meant different options. You could did in to your point at the 30 you were stable. You didn't have to just go and take a job. What was it about money habitudes that drew you in?
So there was quite a few things, but in the big, like blazing, flashing red light was when I had first learned about the product when I was at graduate school and I used it. And then I started talking to other people about it. I was like, oh, you use this, because I learned about it from a few different people. I loved the diversity of people that were using it. Like I met somebody from a credit union, then I met somebody from the military, then I met a wealth manager. And I was like, wait a second, there's a tool that all of these financial professionals use, right? Because the world that I came from, very certain products are for very certain people, right? Again, I'm talking about quintessential financial products, right? You don't sell whole life policies to like the teacher who just got her first job at the public school. But you also, she's not an accredited investor, so you can't show her a hedge fund that you might think is a great investment, or right, like a balloon payment mortgage is not for someone who doesn't make bonuses. Like there's all these financial products out there that are very specifically for certain groups. And I thought, how cool that this product seems to be pretty neutral, and everybody's got a money story and everybody's got a behavior and an attitude towards money, whether there's 3 zeros in the bank, 5 zeros, no zeros, a million zeros, like everybody's got some story. And that's really what attracted me to it from the beginning. And then I went to go intern for the company and something to do, right? Something it seemed enjoyable. And the woman who ran it was, in her later stage of life, was looking to transition out as the tool needed to be, just brought into technology and whatnot. And the rest is kind of history. So, it's been an interesting roller coaster because this was not in the plan. Like, I don't think I thought I'd be working. I love to work. This is a very committed kind of work now because we have so many clients and right, like I don't have flex. So it's funny, you want to come full circle. I I run the business, right? I'm vested in the business. I call the shots in the business, yet I don't own my own time right now. The
Mhm.
business owns me at this point.
Yeah.
And so that's been a bit frustrating over the last like 6 months to come to terms with that because it does feel a little failure-esque. And I would think, I mean, and I'm not shooting my own horn, but a lot of people, I mean, I've had multiple emails over the last year. So I've only taken over about a year and a half ago. Over the last year, I've gotten beautiful emails from people about this is a 23-year-old product. So it didn't just start. And people have commented on how they're so thrilled what I've done and how happy they are and how supported they feel and how they're thrilled to continue to use the product. But I get these, I very rarely get like they're not doing a good job. But on my own self-analysis, the fact that I can't really take a Tuesday off right now just because I feel like it.
Thanks for sharing that. And I want to ask you a question specifically on that because I know many people listening, whether it's time or money, these are often the ones I hear about, is that, I'm handcuffed in some way. How, if you don't mind sharing, how are you reconciling or accepting the fact that you can't go play tennis, so to speak, on a
Right.
Tuesday?
So I don't always do a good job at it. I think again, battles, right? Like I
Mhm.
think there's certain things that are coming up on the pipeline that I'm like, I am not gonna miss that thing. I am not, right? And so hell or high water, the New York Times will call and say we want to do a publication and they'll give me that date that battle is on. I find myself, and this has happened quite a few times, as I said, in the last 6 months, where I'm at crossroads, where both things that I'm holding both feel so valuable, right? Because money can buy me an assistant or more teammates or more employees or whatever. But some of this stuff that feel like career highlights, feel like the thing I want to give back, right? I find myself at this crossroads. I also really enjoy like being a social butterfly. So when you invite me to come speak or somebody invites me, like that sitting with the tech team and dealing in my sandbox when they have to like roll out the new tech, like I have to do that because I'm invested and I'm the one that talks to the clients mostly. So I have to just kind of offer feedback there. That's not what I enjoy. I enjoy being out and about. I enjoy when somebody comes over to me after I speak and says, like, oh my God, you said it the way nobody ever has, or you were so truthful about it, or right, you were raw about it. You didn't sugarcoat it. You didn't make me feel bad that I'm a step kid that I don't want to give any money to. Right?
Mhm.
Like those are the things that really light my fire. So then I look at so go back to the battle, right? Like my son will be like, Mom, I really need you to be at XYZ. And I'm like, all right, I'm committed to that. I missed your last four things. So I lost the last four battles. I'm going to make that one. And then this thing will come up and this thing feels so big.
Yeah.
And then I find myself negotiating. Sure, let's look, I call it like I see it. Don't put it above me. Like, I honestly bought this kid something that I never would have bought any of my other kids because I felt so damn guilty that I was missing something that I promised I would be at. And I absolutely used money to do it. And I like had to call myself out on it. Like, I had to say to him, I was like, so you need to know this, and I'm going to tell you, and this is what went down. And this is not normally the way I behave, but I'm buying myself out of jail. And so, not that I think it made it right, but at least, first of all, we've got four other kids in this house, right? So we don't want the narrative to be like mommy loves him the most or, right, treats him the nicest. I needed everybody to know that I was not aware of what I was doing.
I feel like that's so great that you can be attuned to yourself to recognize that and then have those conversations to your kids. Again, this idea of teaching a fish, I mean, what a valuable lesson that is to
No,
your
because
children.
now my kids are trying to find me when I'm like, at my
They're
I'll try
smart
to.
kids. Well,
Yeah, so I don't know if you ever get it perfect. Again, I think you keep, again, people will say don't keep a scorecard. I keep a scorecard and I've got my won that one, I lost that one, I took
mhm.
over that territory. Right. For me, again, I'm back to the P&L. Like the trader in me will never leave the person in me. It's inherently who I am. There's a win and a loss, and I'm very like I've done a ton of the work, obviously, as you know. I've done the classes, I've done the self-analysis, and I will forever live by a P&L. It's just who I am.
I feel like there's a song or a book in you titled something to do of the degree of the trader in me. Um, So I'm seeing the time here, and I want to end on a question I ask everybody. But I read something on LinkedIn that I thought was interesting, and it was about music. And speaking of endings, it was in and around retirement and how you had, I believe you were coming back from a conference, and the U2 song "Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For" came on,
Yep. And
and you
Andy
were
Grammer,
referencing,
85,
and
right?
yeah,
It was the second song with Andy Grammer. And I thought, wow, these are like the two, like are these, is the message here? Like, do we travel all these roads and no matter what we're looking for, like we don't find it? But you brought that up a few times on this call. Like what I was looking for at 24 changed by the time I was 30, changed by, I mean, the overarching goal didn't change, right? That financial independence or that sense of security, but like what fills me up absolutely has ebbed and flowed and changed, right?
mm-hmm.
And I do think that retirees, at least when I'm having these conversations with pre-retirees and then post-retirees, again, the fantasy is always better than the reality, right? So like people think like, when they think about retirement initially, I think they think the favorite vacation spot, that's where I'm going to go, and it's going to be like vacation.
Yeah.
And you and I, in the work we do, we know that that's not the way it goes. And I give this advice, and I'm not a wealth manager, but when I do work in those spaces, here's the advice I give. Between 40 and 55 years old, take 10 vacations from work, but not vacations. Get the places you think you want to retire, even if it's in your home, and spend a week and play retiree. Do you go to the gym? Like, let's say you would think you're living Staten Island and you thought you were going to retire in Charlotte, North Carolina. Fly to Charlotte, don't stay in a hotel, don't go on any excursions. Rent an Airbnb in the neighborhood you think you're going to live in. Walk to the grocery store, walk to the pharmacy, walk to the nail salon. Do you join the YMCA? What kind of classes do they offer? What kind of people sit in the park? What do you do every day? What do you eat? One, at the end of that week, add up all the money, figure out what you spent, because now we'll know if we have enough money for retirement or not. And two, you'll know if you really, by like Wednesday, most people are like scratching their head, like, what the hell do I do? Right? And so that gives you a bit indication if retirement should even be a thing for you. And if it's not, then maybe you should dabble in the monies that you have saved a little bit more while your knees and your hips and your, shoulders feel good and have the experiences. Because by the time you're 81, as much as you think you're going to love to do things, your hip might be a little bit wonky. Right? Like I'm a snowboarder. I know that I'm not going to like hit the slopes the way I do at 80. I mean, I know at 46, I'm not hitting them the way I was at 35, far be it from 25. Right? So I think those are the narratives that we have to like, what are you looking for? And if we throw it out so far, have we changed so what we're looking for changes? Maybe it's what am I looking for? Like if we woke up in the morning, what am I looking for before I put my eyes to bed tonight? Right? Because cumulatively, if you did that every day, I think you wind up where you're supposed to be.
That is a great suggestion. What am I looking for? And today's the interesting thing about it all is today's the only day we actually live.
Right.
And if I'm seeking something like 65 retirement to go down to Jimmy Buffett's Margaritaville, which to your point, well, it would be fun for a while or a long time. But anyhow, if I'm like, postponing everything, then yeah, I think you wrestle with this. I still haven't found what I'm looking for.
Right. And again, maybe it is. I mean, maybe there are people that would be great. You think Tom Cruise and Cocktail, right? Like he went on that long, the guy that he did the bartending with, the older guy, right? Like that guy was on a long journey. I'm sure there are people out there like that. I'm not here to say yay or nay to anybody. What I'm here to say is because what I think happens to us as people, as humans, we make these commentaries or we make this thing and then we hold ourselves to that. And even if it's no longer working for us, we're still like, whether we're afraid to disappoint someone that we've changed our mind, or whether we're afraid to disappoint ourselves, or we had this idea of the way it was going to be, and we could already see it's not going to be the way we thought it was going to be. Right? And so, but we're too afraid to pivot away from it because it does feel scary, right? There's security in what we know. And so doing what we know often heals. I mean, I've got a slew of retirees. I don't know how many, that are in your like depth that you're working with, but like I've got guys, particularly friends of my dad's, that I talk to constantly. These guys are 78, 80 years old. They are still saving for retirement as if they have another 50 years. And I'm like, boys, what are you doing? Like, why? I mean, the tax bills, I got like 9 calls this year about tax bills. And I'm like, because you fools are still like, no, you're not supposed to be reinvesting the required distribution. What is wrong with you people? And what are you doing with this money? And they won't spend it. I give them a million suggestions on ways to spend it. And not spend it frivolously. I'm not saying go out and buy a Louis Vuitton bag. I'm saying, like, take your grandkids to do something. One of the suggestions was, your grandkids really want to go to Disney. Take your grandkids to, I would never pay that price. I'm like, so you'd rather put the money in a 2065 Vanguard fund. You're 79 years old, a 2065 Vanguard fund. Do the math. There's no way you're alive. So you would rather kick the can down the road than indulge an experience with your grandkids where you wait online, and although you might be hot and bothered, they may tell you something that forever touches your soul. Or you're going to give them a memory that my grandpa took me to Disney and we waited on the, Little Mermaid ride. And like, I don't know, like, I get it. Disney's expensive. Believe me, nobody gets more annoyed about than me with 5 kids. But it's not like something where you're running credit card debt and we're not bleeding out of our eyeballs and you're putting the money in a 2065 fund. I don't know. I could see 20 other uses for that money that could maximize your livelihood, right? Like that's where money could make something, magnified and enjoyable.
It's we talked about full circles here. The origins of your story on the trading floor are really about the P&L, like dollars in, dollars out. Are we making money? And that version of yourself might have been like, yeah, these 79-year-olds are doing it. They're making more money. But it's, hearing you talk now, it's
time flips, right? As you said before, time and money forever have that battle, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a point, and you and I were talking about it earlier with that standard deviation. Like if we live on a bell curve, right? There's a point where money crosses over time. Or time crosses over money, right? Where the time is so much more valuable, not because you think you're going to die tomorrow. I mean, you could, but it's also quality of the time, right? We know as we get older, we get crotchety. We know that we get hip achy. We know that we don't have the longevities. We know that things happen to us. We know that we lose people we love. We know that kids aren't small anymore. Like, time is the only thing that we don't control. And we can't buy it. So when you can buy it, like these situations, where you can buy a moment in time that leaves an inflection point on yourself and someone else, I'm always going to tell you to spend the money.
Mm-hmm. I guess I'm having a Morgan Housel pulling up in the car moment where I'm thinking about myself. There's so much research around outsource your money, like outsource tasks so you get more time. Like Elizabeth Dunn is a fascinating researcher and has come up with some good recommendations. I often think like it's not enough just to outsource that. You still have to use the time on that Little Mermaid ride, etc.
But remember, that smacked me in the face when I thought I could outsource and go to work and have babysitters. I lived in New York City. Everybody has nannies. Mm-hmm. Right? I was the only mom, like in our little group, that there was no nanny when I finally stopped working.
In hindsight, I can imagine you're thanking yourself for that decision to.
I don't know. I don't know. Again, there are days, Sean, it's every day, right? Like I battle every day. Some days I wake up and my husband's still in trading and he, that's still what he does. And there are days that he has career, moments where I'm like, oh, that's in my career. Like I'm envious of it. I'm jealous of it. I mean, we have a great relationship, but that doesn't stop me from he's so much better at celebrating my moments than I am at celebrating his moments, because I realized we were not equal when it came to who was going to stay home.
Mhm.
Like, it doesn't, I know there's all these narratives out there. We're not here to talk about what all those are. In my world, Wall Street was not going to pay me ever what they're going to pay him. I'm not angry about it. I'm not upset about it. I had
Mhm.
organs that he doesn't have. So, like, that's just the way it goes. And he had longevity in a career that I just didn't bring to the table. He also had skills to be tech driven, and I didn't possess those skills. So, as the trading floor went to technology, I would have been put out of work anyway because I don't possess those skills, right? So everything happens the way it's supposed to happen, but that doesn't mean every day I wake up and I'm thrilled about, wait, there's nothing I can do about it now. This is the decision, and my kids are absolutely who they needed to be because
Yeah.
of what I put in. And if that's, I guess, my contribution, or if that's my legacy at some point, that like these people go out and they are, they can stand on their own 2 feet, they're financially autonomous, they can support themselves. I see the bright-eyed and bushy-tailedness of when so my son's actually this afternoon going to buy his first car. He's buying a
Oh,
He's buying a Honda Accord. He's saved up all the money. He's like going with cash. He worked all last year and put all the money away. And like he's like chomping at the bit. Like he can't even believe. And it was funny because he was upset. He said to somebody, I'm going to buy a car. And they were like, oh, it must be nice that your parents. And he was so offended because he was like, no, I went to work for that. I didn't.
yeah.
Right? But people take away so that's why it's like you can't even share some things with the world sometimes because again, back to Morgan Housel, they're looking at it from their perspective. So
Mhm.
people they look at our lives, they're like, oh, they're doing well. Of course, the family's going to buy the kid a car.
Mhm.
They would have no idea that we're making the kid go to work every day and like save all his shekels and buy his own car.
We all have stories that are untold to others.
Yep, yep, and we can't judge, right? It's not
No,
fair,
yeah.
people, right? Because
Mhm.
we do say to people things like, "Oh, it must be nice," or you're low income, so you must be uneducated, right? Like we have these narratives. I do
Mhm.
a whole training on financial bias training because it's forget money, it's words, it's the associations, it's things we see and we automatically think it's got to be like this for them, and we don't
Mhm.
have an opportunity to tell their like how that even came to be. Like those kids that are unbanked, they're financially educated. They were not educated.
Yeah. But that was such a great story how you saw them and like empowered them really or
Yeah,
allowed them to see their own power that they exist or they had.
there's not
Well,
even give them
I
credit.
see the time here. This has been a lot of fun. I was looking forward to it and I appreciate the conversation. The last question that I've asked everyone is let's now assume or pretend you're at end of life, however old that is, it is, and you're sitting on a front porch looking out at somewhere that brings you complete peace, ease, and contentment.
No, I know it's end of life, Sean. I know. Like, do I know it's end of life?
Yes, you know it's end of life.
And I know this is written down. It's on the paperwork. Like I say to my kids, if I had one iota of a pulse, you need to make. So I'm sitting at the slot machine without whatever is. I empty out the checking account. It's in there. I got a pack of like Marlboro Red. I'm not even a smoker, and I'm like slamming on the thing, oxygen tank, like driving 80 miles an hour, like into the afterlife.
This is the best. Okay, I like that one. Where's the slot machine? Which city? What
I mean,
country?
probably Vegas because that just is what would resonate with me. Like in like a seedy casino, right? Like we ain't going
Uh,
high class. Like we're going. Like I got yoga pants on.
yeah.
I got right. And I might be a little dirty at that point, but I'm like I look like I lived. Like I don't want to show up the end of life and anybody think there was anything left.
That
Right? Like I want people to be like, oh my God, she squeezed that lemon until literally the last like drop of juice came out.
I asked that question because there's a part of me that was like, I wonder if she's gonna say Reno. And the way you described it, maybe it could have been.
I think you know the difference between Vegas and Reno, and coming from Canada really gives me an inclination of what you know about Reno.
You know what? My wife and I spent our 10-year anniversary in Reno, and it was amazing.
Oh, but yeah, that's my end of life, right? Like
Okay.
you squeezed every ounce out. And I think that's honestly, I think fortunately that's where I'm at my life now. Like we've lost, and I'm sure you have too after COVID, like there's all these random like young deaths, right? Like, people that you thought had another 35, 40, 50 years ahead of them, all of a sudden were dropping like fireflies. Again, having lived through September 11th, I've being front and center for a few of these events. And I know things that they say cannot happen. Very
Mhm.
aware of that. And I also am aware that if today's it, I've got to get everything out of it I can get. Because who the hell knows tomorrow?
Y- You don't. Well, I think you answered the question, because it was then writing a letter to your children's children of what you learned about having a happy and healthy relationship with money. But perhaps that was your answer. Squeeze everything out of it.
Squeeze everything out of it, but obviously with security, right? Like, and I don't know if you heard me. I specifically said I took everything out of the checking account and
Yeah.
put it in a slot machine. Like, we don't empty all the accounts.
Yeah.
Like, God forbid you live that day, you still need some chips on the table to continue to play. But I think I think again, know what you're willing to go to the wall with, and get that ready, and take it to the limit, right? Can't say it better than the Eagles said it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. For people listening who want to find more information about you, Money Habitudes, where would you point them towards?
Sure, they can go to LinkedIn, Cara Macksoud at LinkedIn, or www.moneyhabitudes.com is our website. And you can always reach out to me at Cara at Money Habitudes. I answer all my emails.
Well, thank you so much. This was a delight, and thanks for sharing your story with us.
Absolutely. So much fun.